There we go. Hey everyone, my name is Alex Biale. I'm one of the co-founders here at Domestique, a revenue operations and just go-to-market operations agency based out of Boulder and Denver. This is Rhys, my co-founder. We are here today because we have been working with a lot of B2B tech SaaS clients, usually Series A to Series D, that are experiencing a lot of the same issues, especially right now going into a potentially turbulent macroeconomic environment. And we're getting asked a lot of the same questions. And one of the main questions we're getting asked is, what is RevOps? How do you actually take advantage of it? How is it different than, a Salesforce admin with a different job title? So what we've done is we've put together this Masterclass series on revenue operations. And in this first class here, we're going to discuss what is revenue operations and the Domestique framework. So we're excited to chat with you all. We're also going to try to make it quick. So if Rhys starts blabbing, I'm just going to move to the next slide. So today's agenda, we're going to give you a little intro into us, who we are, a little bit of our background, so you know that we're not making this up. We're going to talk through our framework for revenue operations and the different work streams that we think defines it, where revenue operations should report to, which is a very common question, and then some proof points that you guys can steal for your own presentations. Okay, Domestique. So Domestique is, like I said, a revenue operations and go-to-market operations agency. We got our start in an interesting way because Rhys and I actually have known each other for years. We've worked together at 2 or 3 different companies. I've always been on more of the marketing operations, business operations side, and Rhys has always been on more of the revenue operations, the sales operations side. And we've helped 2 companies get acquired and been a part of other integrations where our companies have bought other companies. And what we realize is, regardless of size, there are a lot of common problems that companies struggle with when it comes to operationalizing their go-to-market teams. So we started to develop a bit of a playbook based on what we've learned, what's worked for us, but especially and more importantly, what hasn't worked for us. And we are now working with a ton of different clients across, different industries, but all in that revenue operations vein. So, Rhys, anything you want to add there?
One fun fact for everybody. One of the questions we get asked about a lot is, where'd you come up with the name Domestique? So Domestique is actually a French term that means servant, but it's gotten popularized in road cycling. And so for anybody who's ever seen the Tour de France and the big pack of riders, the pack is called the peloton, but the individuals who sit at the front of the pack, they're called domestiques, because road cycling, what they're doing is they're breaking the wind and making the ride easier for everybody else. So they'll literally sit on the front of the ride for 100 miles out of 101 miles. And at the end, the leaders will come around and take it. So we thought it was a nice homage to revenue operations. And Alex also likes to dress up in spandex. So he's a big fan of road cycling as well. So
I like the name, hate the sport, hate the spandex. Not all about it, not even a little bit. Okay, this is us. We kind of just introduce ourselves so we can skip this. It's probably the least interesting side. What is RevOps? We're glad we assumed you asked. One of the more important things about revenue operations that we think most companies and most operators get wrong is that revenue operations is the connective tissue across the entire customer journey. It is not just the operations team or role that sits under sales ops or sits under revenue, right? This is not a Salesforce admin with a new job title. This is inclusive of your marketing operations, sales operations, customer success operations, in coordination with your other tangential teams, so product marketing and finance. Most RevOps. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, all I was going to say is one important point there is we actually think the vast majority of people out there, when they're talking about revenue operations, think about it too narrowly. And this is either a function of, oh, hey, we had sales ops, so we're just changing the title, we're promoting it, or, oh, yes, they're just going to help sales and marketing. But as Alex points out, it truly is across that customer journey. And when you see it interconnected like that, that is truly the difference between sales ops and revenue operations.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better. You know, and this is a bit of a gold standard here. Most companies don't reach this, but ideally, your revenue operations function should help you see around corners in your go-to-market planning, your go-to-market strategy, understanding what's working in your funnel, what's not, why companies are churning. We'll get into more of this. Rhys, you wanna walk us through our framework here?
Yeah, so as Alex alluded to, because we've worked together at a couple different companies, we started to build this framework. And this is how we think about revenue operations. So the first point is what Alex alluded to earlier. It has to be across the entire customer journey. So we have a standard bow tie slide, but it's truly inclusive of product, marketing, BDR, sales, PSCS, all in alignment with finance, right? It's not just sales and marketing. Then we have 5 work streams across the customer journey, and the order of those work streams is important. So the first is planning. This is your strategy. And if your strategy is not written down on a piece of paper, it doesn't exist. We work with a lot of clients who are like, oh, yeah, we got to go to market strategy. And it's like, all right, can we see it? They're like, oh, well, it's kind of this and that. And, you know, like I said, if it's not written down, it doesn't exist. So planning includes everything from capacity planning, your territory strategy. Are you using a values-based messaging framework like a command the message or a SPICE? All those types of high-level things. The next is process. Your process comes out of your strategy, right? This is the day-to-day, how the team does things. So this is everything from how does a BDR take a first phone call? What's the information they're capturing? How does sales take a closed won deal and hand it off to the customer success team? What's the information they're transferring back and forth? How is CS engaging with the customer depending upon your segmentation and engagement strategy? Third is tooling. The tooling is not just a CRM. This is the entire tech stack that touches the customer journey. And it should be set up based upon your strategy and your process. It shouldn't dictate it, right? You know, we see a lot of companies who are like, oh, hey, we do it this way because this is how Salesforce is set up. It's like, no. What's your strategy? What's your process? Then set up your tech stack. One of the things we always recommend when we're talking about tooling is we actually recommend from a best practice standpoint of setting it up very similar to a product sprint cycle where anybody can submit requests. Hey, I want to change this in Salesforce. I want to do this in Outreach. I want to do this in Clary, right? And you're not just going to say yes to everything. You're going to take a look at a strategy and the process, say, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to tweak this and we will do this. This is everything we did for the last 2 weeks. This is kind of our roadmap / sprint for the next 2 weeks. Get back together and then communicate out all the work, right? So everybody knows what's going on across the tech stack. Fourth is your data. Data comes out of the tech stack. 3 things about data. Only measure what you can make a decision around. We see a lot of companies like, oh, sweet, look, we have 500,000 dashboards. Like, okay, why? Like, what are you doing with those? Second, it's got to fly at the right altitude. So if you're, data for the executive team should be at 60,000 feet, whereas data for individuals like Alex and myself and other ops individuals are probably more than 6,000 feet. And 3, it's got to be presented in such a way where the end consumer of the data actually understands what it means without RevOps having to explain what it means, right? So you can put together dashboards reporting, but it's that insights piece. What does this mean and how do I actually go make a decision around it? Last is enablement. The data highlights the hotspots in the customer journey, and you can point your enablement at it. We think of enablement in 3 buckets. 1 is skills. How do you have an executive conversation? How do you use SPICE or command the message? Those types of things. 2 is tooling. How do you leverage the tech stack to be more efficient, not less? And then 3 is competition or market. How do you position the product within the larger market? So competitive battle cards, pricing, objection handling, things like that.
Love it. I'm glad you do that spiel because I trip over myself every time I try to explain all that. Couldn't agree more. I mean, with everything that Rhys said there. One thing I'll add is, so we apply this framework to every revenue operations team we work with. There are nuances, obviously, within each of them. But a place to start, if you're a revenue operator, or if you're running a revenue operations team, or if you're a CEO unsure where you should have your RevOps function focus, is try to have them focus on answering and understanding these 5 topics over here on the right. So these 5 bullet points here are the most common go-to-market problems that we see across the board. So ICP and segmentation, right? Or I should say a lack of clear ICP and segmentation. Most companies loosely understand who their ICP is, but to Rhys's earlier point, it's not written down, it's not codified in your CRM, it's not clearly understood, and it's not aligned across each of the go-to-market teams. They don't really have segmentation codified in a scalable enough way that allows your internal processes to rely on it. Lack of demand, I feel like this is something that every company deals with. So it's not that you have a lack of demand at the top of the funnel, it's understanding why. So do you have the attribution insights in place to be able to understand, well, I'm putting more money in at the top of the funnel, but I'm not getting the return I'm hoping for. Where's the breakdown there? Your attribution model should be able to answer that question. Funnel conversion is something we are seeing literally across the board with every business we're engaging with right now. And every business is slightly different, so the words you use here might be different, but it's really in the marketing to sales or marketing to SDR handoff, and then in that initial sort of demo to opportunity, like that. And essentially MQL into pipeline is breaking down right now, and part of it is because, again, just I'm making a generalization, but it's been true with every client we're working with, is there's a breakdown between the insights that the sales team is learning from the prospects, right? So the prospects were telling them, my budget's cut, my time frame is not reasonable, we don't have the resources, but we're not funneling that back up into marketing insights. So all your lead scoring and your marketing communication that you're putting out there isn't aligned, and so there's this process gap, right? Net effective retention, right? There is a healthy ratio here that every company should be striving for. However, we see that most companies can't even report on this, right? So it's not just how good are you at closing new business, but are you keeping them? Do you have high churn? Understanding that and being able to unpack that in a sophisticated way will make a huge impact to your unit economics. And then data and insights is just, again, across the board. Most companies, to Rhys's earlier point, can report on a lot of fluff metrics that don't actually mean much, right? But if you have to sit down either as a CEO, a CRO, any go-to-market executive, and if you had 10 questions that you were allowed to ask of your revenue operator, what would those be? And do they have the ability to answer them? All right, so we're going to dive through each of the individual work streams and talk through a real life example of what we mean. So Rhys is going to talk us through the planning work stream.
So as we talked about kind of at the top, planning is our first work stream, and planning is essentially analogous with your strategy, right? And we talked about strategy being written down and clearly codified on a piece of paper that you can communicate to that 22-year-old BDR who's their first job out of college. There are a number of components inside of planning. And as I mentioned, things like capacity planning, territory strategy, things like this. What we have an example of right here is capacity planning. We do a lot of this with a lot of clients, particularly at the end of fiscal years and things like that. When we talk about capacity planning, one of the classic mistakes that we see a lot of organizations make is like, oh, hey, the board wants us to grow by $10 million, right? All right, we just need to have $10 million or $10 million plus, a small margin in quota capacity of salespeople on the street, and we're good to go. But the way that we think about capacity planning is a couple of different things. One, it's across the entire, as we mentioned, customer journey, right? So this isn't just a sales conversation. It's, all right, if we're trying to grow at $10 million, like how much marketing dollars do we need? Are we investing the right amount in marketing? What's our current spend per dollar created from pipeline? When does that need to show up from a velocity standpoint? Do we have enough BDRs to meet the marketing leads? If marketing leads have to go up by 20% to hit 10 million, do we even have enough BDR capacity? All right, when do they have to have a button seat? And do we have enough capacity if we lose somebody or promote somebody, we can handle that. All right, then it gets into the sales conversation, right? Not only about do we have enough capacity, but can we handle churn? Are we evaluating ramp correctly? Is our quotas even set correctly? And then the downstream, the funny part is like most people when they do this exercise always forget about the CS side. But all right, if we do close $10 million, like what does that mean from a CS standpoint? So how many new customers is that? Are they all in the same segment? How many PS resources do we need? CSMs, support resources, things like that. So that's across the entire customer journey. And then what we do is we look at it not only from a bottoms up of like, all right, what is the legitimate capacity of the team given historical conversion rates? And then what's the top down? The top down, that's that $10 million number, right? What is the board or the executive want to grow by? And here's the dirty little secrets. 9 times out of 10, there's a delta between, and it's more like 999 out of 1,000. There's a delta between the top down and the bottom up. But what capacity planning, when done really well, this facilitates a conversation. Capacity planning is not an Excel model. If you just create an Excel model and wipe your hands, it's like you have not done your job. What it is it facilitates a conversation, because typically what we see is we'll get in a room with a bunch of executives, CEO, and or the board from the top down perspective. And then the key leaders on the bottom route, right? Your head of marketing, your head of BDR, sales, and CS, and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. CEO, I know you want to grow by $10 million, but just so you know, there's a $2 million gap between currently what we can do based upon given timelines, conversion rates, things like that, current investment versus doing this. How do we want to close the gap, right? This isn't a so-and-so's, doing wrong. One of the big areas that we see as a mistake is when people are like, well, let's just increase quotas, or let's just, increase quota to like using hope as a strategy. What we ultimately see in this process is a healthy tension where each individual is kind of signing up for different things. Of the marketing person will say, all right, I think I can get 10% more out of our spend, but I'm going to need 5% more spend to go run additional events. BDR team is like, all right, we're going to hire 2 more people. I think we can increase quota and things like that. Salespeople, we can't increase quota, but I think we can increase attainment, maybe only on the mid-market side, not on the enterprise side. And so everybody's signing up and you're starting to move these different assumptions. And then this is the key. You take those assumptions and you map it into a reoccurring process where you're constantly evaluating the funnel against those assumptions to say, hey, are we tracking against these assumptions? Because one of the classic mistakes, again, is you wait till mid-year the following year after your capacity plan and say, oh, shoot, we're not going to hit our year's number. Instead of like constantly tracking this, where you can say in late January, early February, it's like, hey, we're behind where we need to be pacing in order to hit this. What are some of the things we can do? Alex, I know you and I come from 2 very different perspectives. You and I have sat in that room, you from the marketing side, me from the sales side. What other things would you add to that, particularly in that kind of healthy tension of like, no, Alex, you got to do on the marketing side. And you're like, no, Rhys, your team has to close more than my marketing dollars.
Yeah, I mean, I think healthy tension is the correct phrase there. And sometimes it doesn't feel very healthy because you're just yelling at me to go and get more leads at the top of the funnel. But that's the right conversation to have, right? And I think having a data-informed conversation across the aisle allows you to understand, well, do we really need more leads, right? Is that the answer, or do we just need more high-quality leads? In that case, well, I already have the high quality. I already have the high quality leads. I just need to nurture them more, which is where I would lean on my lead scoring, right? So it doesn't give you the answers, but it does facilitate those conversations. Cool. All right, we're gonna move on. Process. I'm gonna move quickly through this one because Rhys took up most of my talking time on the last slide. So in this example, we're gonna talk through life cycle stages. This is something that you should all be doing. And if you're not doing, you should talk to your revenue operations team or marketing operations team and ask why. The life cycle stage, when done well, is the backbone of your entire go-to-market engine. It tells you at the highest level, is this person, is this account, is this prospect a subscriber, a lead? Are they marketing qualified? Are they sales qualified? Do we have an open opportunity with them, or are they a customer? The reason that's valuable is not just so you have an organized system, it's so that you can prioritize the communication in an automated and a one-to-one way, right? You want to understand from an SDR's perspective, am I talking to the right person at the right company at the right time, right? Or am I just sorting my target account list by A to Z, right? This allows you to understand the key activities, the primary owners for each of these different cohorts, right? So the idea would be is if you have this automated and codified in whatever tech stack you have, your HubSpot, your Salesforce, Marketo, whatever it is, if you have this codified, you can start to create playbooks for each individual lifecycle stage, which allows you to get really organized and automated around the communications and the forecasting. If you get this done well, your forecasting will improve. All right, moving on to tools. This is just an example, right? But we believe strongly that revenue operations should not just be responsible for your CRM, usually your Salesforce or your HubSpot. It should be responsible for the entire go-to-market and tech stack. This is an example of a real customer that we have been engaging with for about a year now. And it's pretty complicated, right? There are a lot of tools here. And the more tools you have, the more that enablement and standardization and process documentation becomes really important, right? And this is, so Rhys will talk about the enablement piece in a bit, but this is where that business systems idea comes into play, right? Where you want to treat this like a product sprint, right? Because you're going to get a request from every single one of these tools to implement 10 new things. You need to be able to have an intake prioritization platform to understand where should I spend my time, right? I could go probably, optimize my drift chatbot. You always can. The drift playbooks are always just never where they should be. But if your lead routing is broken and your SDR team aren't getting their leads, you should be prioritizing your distribution engine, your chili piper, your lean data, right? So having a sophisticated understanding of the nuances within your tech stack is crucial. Data. So these are real charts. These are examples from one of our customer platforms. We're going to talk through 2 examples of the types of data that are actually independent and interconnected that we try to roll out with all of our customers. The top left and top right here is a glance into cohort analysis. Cohort analysis is one of those I don't know. It's something that every revenue operator chases for their whole career to try to get it dialed perfectly. And we've never seen it done perfectly because the source data for any cohort analysis is just never perfect. But if you can get directionally correct, you can start to identify some trends. So in these top 2 charts here, what we're looking at in the top left here, this is this quarter's leads by their current life cycle stage. What this means is broken down by the week that they became a lead, that's their cohort. Where are they now? The idea is over time, you want to see these leads becoming whatever the next stage is. You want to see them becoming a marketing qualified lead, an opportunity, a customer. In this example, we're seeing a lot of turquoise or blue or teal or whatever that color is, but we're seeing a lot of that color, which is lead, which means people are getting stuck in the lead to MQL conversion. That's important to know, because if you're not converting at a high enough rate from lead to MQL, it means you're not feeding your sales team. So is this data 100% accurate? Probably not. I'll be the first one to admit that. But is it directionally correct over a long enough time period? Absolutely. If I'm the operator here, I'm saying there's something either broken in my lead scoring that's not qualifying leads to be MQLs, or there's something broken in the top of the funnel where I'm actually capturing leads. Maybe I'm capturing the wrong leads. Oh, well, that makes sense. I just turned on this new campaign that's driving all the wrong volume. This is where I would focus. The bottom here is this quarter's MQLs by their original source. So this is like an attribution model. You want to understand where your demand is coming from, right? This is just one example. There's a million ways you could slice this, but this fuels that, potentially tenuous conversation that I would have to have with a head of sales in capacity planning. All right, if Alex, if I'm going to come and give you an extra $100,000 over the next 3 months to go and spend and demand, where are you going to spend it? This is where I would look. Where am I getting my MQLs from?
And what's interesting is this is why all these work streams are interrelated, because if Alex gets an extra couple $100,000 to go spend it, he then spends it. And let's say it's getting stuck in lead to MQL. He needs to be able to see that. And then the stuck issue is that a tooling issue, which we just talked about on the previous slide? Or is this a process issue in how we currently have it set up? Or is it a strategy/planning issue because we're going after the wrong ICP or the wrong leads or the wrong approach? But this is why it's all interconnected.
Exactly. Yep, exactly. All right,
enablement. One of the reasons why we love enablement is it's one of the proactive tools that RevOps has in its belt of, okay, we have this issue. How do we go and address this issue? The example that we have up here right now, this is stage advancement criteria. So stage advancement criteria, just at a high level, this is your clear definitions of each stage. What are the activities everybody needs to do in order for something to move from stage to stage to stage? The reason why this is so critically important is because, particularly as you grow as an organization, different reps may have different opinions of what is a stage 2 versus a stage 2 if you don't have it clearly defined and codified into your CRM. It's shocking how many companies that we work with that don't have this clearly identified, and then the board is asking them to forecast their pipeline. Problem is how do you ever forecast your pipeline if you have different definitions of what is a stage 2? So, one of the things early on is we always like tying a stage advancement criteria to a framework like a MedPig, because then you have a clear, consistent definition of, hey, how is everybody engaging in an opportunity? What are the definitions to advance each and everything? But what's interesting is Alex talked about life cycle stages earlier. There was a section in there for opportunity. This is essentially the blown out version of the opportunity piece. So the life cycle thing is, how are you defining all those stages leading up to the opportunity? And then these are all the definitions of the opportunity. So the cool part is once you get that done, you have an apples to apples comparison of everything that is flowing all the way from your marketing funnel down to your sales funnel. And you can start to get really accurate about forecasting. And typically what we see is once this gets instituted is your conversion rates inside your sales funnel go up, and you typically see your ASPs go up as well.
Amen to that. All right, Rhys, where should RevOps report? One of the most common questions you get every week.
We get this asked all the time, and I think part of the reason Alex smirked and gave this to me is I get very passionate about this. So a couple of things, I know it has revenue in its title, and I know there's also revenue in a CRO title. We fundamentally do not think it should report to a CRO, and I'll explain why. A lot of CROs typically have marketing sales. Now you're starting to see more and more CROs that are marketing, sales, and customers. So there's a little nuances there, but I'll explain what I mean. So we've talked about here, and we've hammered home the entire time, has to be across the entire customer journey. So if you're across the entire customer journey, but if you're only reporting up to an individual who's responsible for marketing sales, because you're comped by that individual, you inherently become marketing and sales operations. So in a perfect world, we think revenue operations should have a seat at the table. And when we say at the table, the executive team or C-suite. The reason being is because you need to be able to be Switzerland. You need to be able to go into your head of marketing and be like, hey, this isn't going very well. And it's not a negative, right? We're all on the same team here, but it's how do we work together, right? You have to be able to call out hotspots in the customer journey without people thinking you have a bias, right? Again, if you report to a CRO and you go over to the customer side of things, and the CRO doesn't own customer, and you say, hey, look, you guys are not doing a very good job expanding the customer base, everybody's gonna be like, well, of course, this is coming from sales. So in a perfect world, seat at the table. If you can't get a seat at the table, you should report up to a COO, where again, you have the ability to be in Switzerland and work across the entire customer journey. If not, and what we typically see is reporting up to a CRO. If it is a CRO that owns just marketing and sales, we think the CRO needs to understand that part of your job is being able to work with the customer team, with the product team, with the finance team, and again, across that customer journey in the areas that are going to have the biggest impact across that. So they got to understand that you may be spending time there, and it's not just running reports for the sales team. All right, the next very contentious question we get on a regular basis: what should report into revenue operations? So in a perfect world, we think there's 5 buckets. Field operations, this is things like your CS ops, sales ops, is more just department specific, in the weeds operations. Second, we've talked a lot about a business systems team. So this is where your CRM admins would sit, but it's not, again, just the CRM admins, the ability to work across the entire tech stack, work with a lot of disparate stakeholders and translate business process into technical requirements. Enablement, this is where your revenue enablement, not just sales enablement, should sit. So they should be doing things with the CS team, the marketing team, the BDR team. Strategy and insights, we see this as 2 different things. Strategy being the more forward-looking. This is your capacity planning. This is the more forecasting stuff. Insights is the more backward-looking historical stuff. So this is your reporting, board reporting, quarterly reporting, dashboarding, et cetera. And deal desk. Deal desk, when done well, is that kind of conduit between the revenue team and finance. And it's not one or the other, but trying to make sure that we're getting as many deals across the goal line, while also making sure that the deals are in the best interest of the company. That typically doesn't happen, all those things, inside of a RevOps. So one of the most important factors inside of RevOps is the ability to lead through influence. So if you have marketing ops is reporting up through a different org, or if you have CS ops is reporting up through a different org, the ability to work with these other individuals and partner around a common framework, even if they don't report directly up to you. So typically you see, in a realistic world, you might have a couple of field ops people, you might have business systems or enablement, and typically you have an analyst or 2, which is more on the insights piece. But that doesn't mean you can't do these other functions as you're thinking about, leading through influence and or tapping other individuals in the across the organization who can help out with some of these functions.
Like I said, Rhys gets really passionate about that, and I don't care as much. Okay, proof points. We got a couple of fun proof points that we have got from both the Boston Consulting Group and just our own clients. Not going to go through all of these, but some big ones that I think are relatable to probably all of you are: we see an average lift in marketing qualified lead to pipeline when you implement a version of everything that we're talking about. You don't need to do it all. You don't need to do it all perfectly. But if you have a framework, if you have some rigor, if you stay consistent, you start to see the results in the right areas. It might take a little time, but you do start to see big results. We also see an average decrease in just general go-to-market technology costs. Because if you know the exact technology you need based on the process, not the other way around, you're not going to buy tech that you don't need. A big one that everybody likes to is, we usually see a lift in sales productivity. And really that's go-to-market activity just across the board here.
One note about all this is typically RevOps is kind of like, it's not this immediate tangible thing where, hey, we invest in this, we see this result tomorrow. Typically, a lot of the things you're doing, right, implementing a lifecycle stages or stage advancement criteria, it takes a while for those things to flow through the funnel. And because of which, depending upon your sales cycles, you may not see results for half a quarter, 2 quarters out. But when you see the results, we see this all the time with clients, the light bulb goes off of like, oh, now I understand why you wanted to do all these different things.
Right. Yeah, couldn't agree more. Okay. That's it. That's our presentation here on, what is revenue operations. Hopefully it was helpful. Again, every company's different, so you're going to have your own nuances and disclaimers and asterisks that, well, what about this? What about that? Totally normal, right? If you have any questions, if you want to reach out to us to discuss a specific problem that you're experiencing, or a problem that you're trying to solve, or a question that you're getting asked that you don't know how to answer, we're always here to help. We're always here to engage. One of the common questions we get is just, after something like this is great, how do I get your help? We can work together in a few different ways, right? And we've tried to summarize that here. So at a high level, we have a go-to-market operations audit that applies the framework that we just talked through to your existing go-to-market strategy. Happy to apply that. That takes around 4 weeks. We have this RevOps as a service offering, where we can have this sort of always-on engagement, where we can come in and act as your fractional head of revenue operations or a fractional role within your team. We could be your strategic advisors if you want something a little bit more forward-looking. We have a deep bench of technical experts that are much smarter than us in all of the common go-to-market tools that can come in and fix or develop anything. And we're always going to build you a roadmap that you guys can use, whether or not you choose to work with us going forward. And then we have this concept of build, grow, scale, which essentially applies to the different maturity stages of your business. There are really common projects and initiatives that companies of different sizes and different stages need to account for. So what we'll do is we'll run an audit on your business and understand, are you in a build phase, a grow phase, a scale phase? Everybody thinks they're in a scale phase. Most companies are actually in a build phase. Tough pill to swallow, but there's a reason why, and we believe that if you build the foundation well from the beginning, you can get to that scale more quickly. Rhys, anything else you want to add?
No, that's it. I think as Alex mentioned, one of the things, we're big believers in paying it forward. And if anybody ever needs a sounding board, we're more than happy to be here.
Cool. All right. I'm sure you're done listening to us yap at each other. Thank you for the time. We appreciate it. And again, if you ever have any questions, if you ever need any help, visit our website and drop us an email. We're on LinkedIn. Rhys probably doesn't check his LinkedIn, but I check mine. So yeah, anyways, looking forward to hearing from you, and thank you for the time. Good luck. See ya. And now the recording won't stop, which is great. There we go.
It's still going.
Yeah, it's still going. Is that on your end or my end?
I think it's on your end. This should be one of those outtakes that we include in it.
Oh yeah, there we go. Stop recording. I hit the tab.